like them who call themselves mothers. To me, is a big disgrace. The sense of motherhood has surely been displaced. We have to stop sexually abusing our children. Delinquent mothers, please wake up. Don't sell out your daughters like livestock. I say to stop sexually abusing our children. They are our nation's future.
up.
Wake up, Grenada. Good night, Delbert. Good night, Grenada, Carrico, and Pity Martinique. This is Gem FM. I'm sitting in here waiting for my host. And hello, Pablo is back. All right.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
We seem to be having some issues with our guest for this evening.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I'm not even getting any response from her at this point in time.
Oh man. All right. She was here. We tried to connect her in, but no. Okay. Let me just pick another song in the meantime. All right.
Okay.
The sun rises slowly over the hills. Everywhere is cold and sunlight, but still, most nights with hotels are crowded. There are days where dark clouds are shrouded. They don't smile and they never will. Only volunteers get their fill. Empty promises is what they get. No running water from year to year. Hearts that no one desire. That if there is a Messiah, someday he hear their whispered prayer. Covered always bare and scanty. 10 people in a one-bedroom shanty. Forced to sign on the pavement. No vacancy, no employment. Cattle fire cracker from gunshot. Blood does flow when things get hot. Afraid to look out the window. To hear voices from the ghetto. Crying, crying, crying. Hey, Lord, Lord. Crying, crying. Voices from the ghetto. Crying, crying, crying. Lord, Lord. Crying. Voices from the ghetto. Help us, Father. Oh, Lord. Mothers does just hold their head up, ball. And them woman stronger than a wall. A big pusher iron she daughter. Son in jail for manslaughter. Too bad for the healing black boys. No bail, that's the black man's choice. Like Shadow say, poverty is hell. She little girl child belly start to swell. Some say life is a cycle, but the draw she no circle. Where will it all end? Only time will tell. Outside the siren king.
Yes, good night to everyone. To Pablo and Delbert Batiste and our special guest, Juanita Hadley. Good night to you. Welcome. Could you please turn on your camera? That would be nice. We want to welcome you to Gem FM Radio. And I'll let you over to Brother Raphael Paul at this time.
Okay, thank you once again, Brother John. Excuse, I don't know, so like something wrong with the voice this evening. Anyway, I'm happy that finally we've been able to get Miss Juanita Headley to connect with us. And it's a pleasure to introduce her, to welcome her to the Gem FM platform, to the talking point, to share her knowledge and her information and her expertise on that whole issue of human trafficking and child abuse. Ms. Juanita Headley is an international speaker, a licensed New York attorney, and the founder and CEO of changing cases. I expect you'll hear a little more about what changing cases is all about. She is based in England generally, but she has been in St. Vincent since August of last year. And she has been sharing information with a variety of entities, the police, churches, and so on, throughout St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So the pleasure is mine this evening to welcome her to the Talking Point. Good evening to you, Ms. Headley. Welcome to the Talking Point.
Can you turn on your mic on your camera, please? Thank you very much. Our mic is off and camera is off. Hello, monitor? Having a difficulty there. Her camera is off and her mic is not on. Oh. Okay, audio or visual, both of them. Both audio and visual, thank you.
Yes, so while we see if we can get this sorted out, so we can get at least some audio from Ms. Headley this evening, I want to remind you that as I got to learn just recently that this month is the month of human trafficking month. And Monday the 11th was Human Trafficking Day. And the designated color is blue. Brother Delbert, good evening.
I got the memo, man. I got the memo.
Yes. You got blue, and well, I've got a lighter shade here. So, I mean, were you aware, do you have, were you aware that this month is Human Trafficking Month? And I know you are a guy with, lots of information and lots of things. I wasn't aware of that.
I was aware that the month, but I think that the specific date, I wasn't aware of it or it slipped me. But I actually tell you that I'm aware of it because of my 17-year-old daughter who is particularly interested in this kind of issues of social justice and exploitation of women.
Okay,
and so
okay.
She sits me on my toes,
Okay, right.
Yes.
You mentioned about your daughter being interested in these kind of things like human justice and and that kind of abuse and so on. But we're seeing that while this whole issue of child abuse or sexual abuse, as we knew it in our culture, was a male abusing a female.
Yeah.
But now we're seeing, repeatedly, there's evidence of this male on male sexual abuse. That hasn't been part of, I grew up as a little boy, I hear about man raping woman, or man interfere with little girl, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the thing to hear a man interfere with a little boy. And that seemed to be becoming the norm in that, in that area. That seemed to be becoming one of the things.
But I think that has been around for a long time, especially in the church. The priest.
I think so too,
The priest, it was kept secret. The church was guilty of that. Yes, the church was guilty of that for years. If you look at back in the days, even in Canada here, coaches, hockey coaches, 20, 30 odd years, they've been sexually harassing young boys. So it's not really a new thing, it's an open thing. The Pandora box is now open.
Well, well, you've heard about those things with the priests and the boys, the acolytes, and people who come under the ward. But within the community, within the society.
All right,
So,
the monitor is up.
Oh, well, Miss Headley is here.
Hi, good night.
Hi, good night.
Finally, we got you on camera and we can hear your voice.
Yes.
You know, we were just passing the time, trying to make up some time, and we were, sharing bits, tidbits of information on what is happening in our, society presently. So let me just introduce you again officially. As I said earlier, we have with us Miss Juanita Headley, and she is an attorney. She is a registered attorney in the U.S., but she grew up in the U.K., and she is the founder and CEO of Changing Cases, which you'll be hearing a bit more about. What is the agenda of Changing Cases? And she has been in St. Vincent, where she is present. She's located presently, I think she's on the island of Beckway. She has been in SVG since August of last year, I think, and she has been sharing information, and it is through her that I got to be aware that this month is Human Trafficking Month, and that Monday the 11th was Human Trafficking Day. Welcome to the platform of JMFN, and welcome to the program, The Talking Point. Good evening, Ms. Headley.
Thank you for having me, and apologies about the technical difficulties. It's one of those things, hence I'm using the phone, so I appreciate your patience.
Yeah, I'm telling you, we can have this thing sometimes, because at the very beginning, we usually say that's the Murphy moment, Murphy.
Yes, definitely.
We usually say that's the Murphy moment because we had a bit of a Murphy moment very early in the evening. So, I've given a little tidbit on, who is Juanita Headley, but can you just share a bit more and let people be aware of who is Juanita Headley and where you're coming from and what Juanita Headley is about and how you became involved in this whole issue of human trafficking and child sexual abuse?
Certainly. So as I shared previously on many of my interviews, I am from London, England, and my parents are from Jamaica. And I always start with that because people hear my accent and they always ask where am I from. So that's one of the first things I always share whenever I do any form of interview. And as you have already explained, I am a New York attorney. I'm a U.S. attorney. And around June to July of this year, it would be 7 years I would have been licensed as a New York lawyer. I am an author, a child abuse prevention specialist, international speaker, and I have my organization, Changing Cases. And the motivation behind what I do, which is primarily giving talks around the world on child abuse prevention and human trafficking, and the links between the two, is that I was indeed the unfortunate victim of childhood sexual abuse from the ages of 4 to 10 by my mother's first husband. Unfortunately, in the eyes of the law, LAW, justice was never served because he died some few years ago. And as with many victims of abuse, including incest, we often do not talk about the issue until many, many years later, when often nothing can be done about it. And what people often don't realize is when you've been a victim, particularly of sexual abuse, it makes you vulnerable to human trafficking. I have not been a trafficking victim, and I trust God that will never happen. But I understand the links, and so I use my own personal story to engage my audience and to have people understand this issue, which is a lot more closer to home than many individuals may realize.
You say the issue of human trafficking, you say you haven't been a victim of human trafficking. I know that in one of those links that you sent me, you mentioned that people tend not to understand the elements of human trafficking. Can you just enlighten us on what are the real elements of human trafficking? Because when we hear trafficking, we usually, what comes to mind is moving people from one location to another, right? Because we consider trafficking to be some movement of goods and services, generally speaking. So can you enlighten us on what really qualifies as human trafficking?
The legal definition is often misunderstood by most people, but what I think is important that those who want to understand what trafficking is, they have to take the definition apart. They have to simply look at it sentence by sentence. And I say that because, as you've rightly commented, people often believe human trafficking requires movement or kidnapping. In fact, that is not the reality. And in the definition, it says the recruiting, transporting, enticing, harboring, and coercion is also in there too. What we have to understand, when an individual is under the age of consent, the definition, it differs very slightly, because when a person is a minor, provided that the first elements are involved, recruiting, transporting, harboring, enticing is involved, there is no requirement of force, fraud, or coercion. But the final element, which is with regards to the exchange of services for money or something of value. However, what I often always explain and what I often allow people to understand is that with the definition, it says recruiting, transporting, harboring, enticing, but there is an or between. Although the word or is not used, a comma is placed in between. So it means it can be the recruiting or the harboring or transporting or enticing. It doesn't require every single one of those to be prevalent or present in an offense. And in a place like St. Vincent, we have many islands which people can move amongst. And one of the islands is called Mairo. I visited Mairo and the police informed me that for many years there was no police presence on that island. They are now there, however, they don't actually have a police station. But what they did inform me is that there are girls in Union Island who are, on occasion, brought to Mairo to have sex with foreign men. These men are called yachties. These are foreign men. However, there may indeed be a girl on Mairo who engages in sexual activity with a yachty. This does not have to require movement. For example, if the individual comes to the girl's home, and that's what I really want people to understand. We have an issue in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, in Trinidad and Tobago, where you may have a mother who, for whatever reason, gives her daughter to her boyfriend, husband, partner, sugar daddy, or a stranger for the purposes of her utility bills to be paid, for mobile phone data, or for her to receive groceries. This, indeed, provided the child is a minor, may actually constitute human trafficking. And this is what I want people to understand. It doesn't require movement. It doesn't require immigration. It is quite simply exploiting another human being or groups of human beings in exchange for something of money or in kind.
Oh boy. You know, when you hear these stories, it makes you wonder, because I'm telling you that we were just speaking about some of the things that's happening right here where I am based here in Grenada. You say that you have traveled widely, and can you just share with us, we'll get back to that issue that you just spoke to, but can you just share with us some of the areas that you've traveled and what are the findings that you've come about?
I've had the opportunity thus far to travel to 38 countries in my life. I have spent a lot of time in Asia. Some of the countries that I have been to includes the Philippines, India, Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, Taiwan. I have to think, so many places. Taiwan, Indonesia, Trinidad, Tobago, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Jamaica, Barbados, US, and Canada. With all these countries, including Ghana in Africa, I haven't always had the opportunity to present on human trafficking. However, while spending time in Asia, I always make it a point to visit the red light district. I have visited the red light district in India, the Philippines, Cambodia, and Indonesia. And going there, it has been very eye-opening. I have spent time there with the prostitutes. Now, in Thailand, there is a term called lady boys. Lady boys are what we may consider in the West as transgender. Some of these lady boys, they look like men in women's clothing. There is actually a lady boy in Angeles, Pampanga, in the Philippines. I will not share their name on air, but they actually look very masculine. They are quite muscular, and they look like a male in a dress. Other of the individuals in the sex industry who are lady boys, they take often the female hormone pill because they cannot afford to have cosmetic surgery. And so therefore, they look female from the waist up, but from the waist down, they are male. I spent a lot of time with individuals like this, and I have had the opportunity to hear their story in the sense of what led them to be there. Some of these individuals have come from poor and remote villages for a better opportunity. Others of them have entered into the sex industry because they believe that they can make a quick buck. However, this is not the reality. And having spent a lot of time there, I have realized it's very competitive. People may not realize that, but you're standing on the street from 10 p.m. till 4 in the morning. There is no guarantee you'll get a customer. And sometimes the way in which these lady boys or women are dressed, it will either get them more attention or less attention. Also, sometimes the customers will not pay them what they are due. And then the reality is when that individual goes to the hotel room or motel room, quite frequently, they are subjected to things that we cannot even talk about on air because of the nature of which takes place. And in some instances, when the customer has no idea that he has indeed picked up a ladyboy, there are instances where that ladyboy will be abused. And there is a case in Angeles, Pampanga, where the ladyboy was in fact murdered as a result of the customer discovering that it was indeed a man. This is a very difficult industry to be in because quite often people will judge these men and women who are selling their bodies without understanding what has led them to be there. It is not always poverty, but there are instances when an individual, male or female, has been victim of sexual abuse in their past, maybe on multiple occasions by multiple perpetrators. And as a result of that, they sometimes have the mindset that it has been taken for free, and so now I will empower myself by putting a price on my body. It is not always the case. In parts of India, sometimes it is the woman's husband who puts her in the sex industry. But I want to point out that in India, not every marriage is forced. Forced marriage, F-O-R-C-E-D, forced marriages and arranged marriages are two very different things. And the culture in India is very different from the culture in the Philippines. And that is something we have to understand. But prostitution, it is an issue all around the world, very closely linked with human trafficking. And in places like Amsterdam and Germany, where prostitution is legal, this actually opens up a can of worms where there is indeed a lot more trafficking, because what happens is a pimp or trafficker will find a young girl or woman and bring them into the sex industry that has been legalized. And so therefore the black market actually increases. And so when many think that it is the right idea, in fact, it creates a bigger problem because it's almost, I guess you could describe it as looking at money laundering, taking something that is dirty and making it clean, in the sense of kidnapping or trafficking an innocent victim, male or female, and then making their acts become clean by bringing them into the legal sex industry. I have not been to Amsterdam. I have no desire to go there whatsoever. However, I feel that it would be important for me to visit at some point to be able to walk along the red light district and to see these women who are being sold inside these sex shops and stand in the display windows.
Wow. What stories? What, Brother Delbert? You want to come in here, Brother Delbert?
Sure. Listen,
Yeah.
this is obviously, having been raised by a very strong mother, I'm particularly sensitive to issues related to women. And as the father of an only child who happens to be a daughter, that keeps me 24/7 nervous, okay? And for especially, she does not live at home, she's away at school, so I'm always concerned about that. But so far, knock on wood, she's been able to protect herself, and I suspect that coming from, the sort of family structure that myself and her mom was able to provide for her health. But listen, this is a terrible thing. I noticed that she mentioned Thailand, which is notorious for that, and Gambia in West Africa is also notorious for that kind of practice. My question, though, is that she seemed to link prostitution and human trafficking. So my question would be, do you think they're the same thing? Is one a stepping stone into the other? Or do you think that in certain societies, and you speak about Amsterdam, which is a very, very liberal place, where pretty much anything goes. So do you make a distinction between human trafficking, in the classical sense of the word or the clinical sense of the word, and legalized prostitution?
Most certainly. Prostitution and trafficking are not the same, even though they may appear to be in certain instances. The best way to distinguish between the two is that prostitution has consent. And it is very difficult for me to use the term consent because I personally do not believe that prostitution is sex work. I do not believe it is a job. And I say that from my research, that the vast majority of women who end up in the sex industry, whether that is prostitution or pornography, in the US, for example, the statistics have said that up to 90% of prostitutes were sexually abused in their childhood. And so when you hear those kind of stats, then you really have to scratch your head and ask, is it really consent? Or is it that their circumstances has led them to make this choice? And again, can we even call it a choice? And then with human trafficking, that is the absence of consent. But for example, you may have a lady who is a prostitute, and that lady sells her body on the street corner. However, she develops a relationship with a man, or she has a protector who is a pimp. In both instances, whether it's the relationship or somebody who comes up to her and offers to protect her, both individuals may indeed be pimps. Because we have something called Romeo pimps, and this is when a guy will wine, dine, and groom a female for the purpose of having her enter into the sex industry. And in parts of South America, we actually have men who will marry a woman for the purpose of pimping her out. So when you are a prostitute without protection, then of course that is consensual. You have consented to be on the street corner or to be on OnlyFans or other such websites. But when a protector takes over, takes all your money or takes most of your money, brutalizes and rapes you, and puts you through psychological trauma, that is when the consent has been taken away, because now you are a victim and subjected to this pimp or trafficker.
So in your travels, and you noted that you have been to several Caribbean countries, do you see it as an emerging problem in the region, or is it something that leaders, political and community leaders in the Caribbean needs to be more aware of, and should we be advocating stronger on behalf of women? And I believe you when you say that there is a sort of direct linkage between, because I think the research clearly says that a direct linkage between young women who were sexually abused at a very early age and either ending up being trafficked, because what that does is that it really sort of eats away at the self-esteem, and not just for a young lady, but for any young person, including young men. If you're challenged, if your self-esteem is constantly been challenged, it's constantly been put on the block, it makes it rather difficult for you to find some meaningfulness in your life, and therefore they sort of become subject to that kind of abuse. So what can we do, since you have studied this issue so in-depthly, what can we do to sort of break that linkage?
Are you referring to the linkage between abuse and trafficking, or the linkage of which?
Well, I'm particularly referring to the linkage between young ladies or young men in some cases who were abused as children and ended up either in the sex trafficking, either in the prostitution business or being a victim of sex trafficking.
I think the first thing that needs to be done is that we need to have legislation in place that will protect and safeguard individuals so that when they do report, even if for some reason there's insufficient evidence, that that individual is protected. Because in certain places, not necessarily in the Caribbean, when an allegation is made, the police will pass on that information and it gets into the wrong hands. There was the case of a girl, I believe it was Pakistan, who came to the police with an allegation of a sexual offense against the teacher, and that information was leaked by the police. And so when she did return to school a few days later, she was enticed upstairs onto the rooftop, if I remember correctly, and she was burnt to death, or she was murdered in very serious circumstances. And so I feel that the first thing is we need to have appropriate legislation so that names do not come out, because the problem is, in the Caribbean, in certain parts of the Caribbean, the islands are so small that gossip spreads like wildfire. And so what we need to do, we need to protect the victim first and foremost. We need to make sure that the victim feels confident to be able to disclose what is going on. And even on the back of that, I've heard from speaking to people in St. Vincent that the laws may have changed, don't quote me on that, but the laws previously at least were that unless the parent or caregiver comes to the police station with the victim, that the victim does not have any ability to speak out against the perpetrator. So I'm hearing different things. I'm not sure if that is still currently the law. But if that is still the issue, then that is really a problem, because if a parent or caregiver does not come to the police for whatever reasons, fear, etc., that means that child will never be able to get justice. And we have to consider too, when a child is abused, often it is somebody that they know, it is not a stranger. And if it is the husband or boyfriend of that mother, for many reasons, she would not want to have her dirty laundry to be aired and would rather kick him out quietly or simply move the child on elsewhere. Because I have heard of instances when children have disclosed and they have been kicked out of their homes as a result of disclosing what has taken place, because the mother would rather protect the perpetrator. Or in other instances, in fact, I don't know if it's a true story, but I certainly heard it through the radio here in St. Vincent, of a young girl who was pregnant. I'm not too sure the circumstances of the pregnancy, but when the parents found out they were Christian, they kicked her out and she committed suicide. I'm not too sure where that happened, and I believe that is most likely a legitimate story. But the fact of the matter is that we have to protect the victim in this situation. What happens quite often when a child does disclose, they are beaten or disbelieved. So we need to change the mindsets of the parents. We need to change it where if a child discloses, the parent responds appropriately. By the child, listen to the first, does perpetrator stays
to be having some technical difficulties.
The child has to protect her or also for that child. It's older. There's an opportunity for them to empower themselves. We have only fans. An individual wants to get.
Brother John, can we take a short break and see if we can sort this out in the meantime?
Okay.
If we can put on Katura's song in the meantime.
All right. He's on her side. We'll fix a mic.
Sadly, you're back with us?
Hello?
Yeah, unfortunately, technical difficulties. I apologize about that.
Because most of what you say there, we didn't hear it clearly. It was just, we were not really hearing what you were saying. So
okay, I will try to summarize again.
Yeah,
the points I was trying to make: believe in the child, do not beat the child when the child discloses, allow the child to communicate to you. And once they have communicated to you freely, without feeling any sense of guilt, blame, shame, or responsibility for what has happened to them, report it to the authorities so the authorities can do the right thing. Because what often happens, a disclosure comes out, and the parent, the mother quite often will protect the perpetrator, kick her daughter out, or put the daughter elsewhere so she can continue to maintain the relationship. And if that child goes through that sort of experience of being abused and not protected, or being abused and continuing to reside in the household, that child will most likely be victim again and again. And when they get older, the lure of websites like OnlyFans will draw them in the sense of, this is a way for me to make money on my body. It has been taken from me for free. I am now empowering myself. So the legislations need to change, mindsets need to change of the police force, of parents, and then young children need to be educated and empowered. Often people talk about awareness. I personally do not like the term awareness, even though this is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. I believe that so many people around the world have awareness of what is going on in their very own backyard or in their own neighborhoods. Awareness for me is like, for example, looking across the road, pointing to a house and saying, that girl, she is promiscuous. That mother sells her daughter to foreign yachties. When those types of things are being said, the challenge I've noticed is people say such things. However, when they make that statement, they are doing nothing to protect that child. A statement is made, and as a result of the statement, people may say, yes, we know that is happening, but no intervention is taking place. And I believe that's where change is required. Because instead of us just being aware of what is going on, we need to be educated on this topic, and then we need to be empowered as to how to respond and how to act appropriately. So my desire, whenever I travel, whenever I speak on this issue, is to not raise awareness. That is not a word I ever use in my vocab. My desire is to educate nations, to educate people, and then empower them with the tools to act and the tools to safeguard people around them. Knowledge is important. As the Bible says, people perish for lack of knowledge. If we want to see change, we need to empower and educate nations so that things can be completely different for those vulnerable people around us and in other parts of the world.
In one of the links that you had sent me, you referenced a youth magazine, something Vogue something, and you had certain concerns about what young people were being exposed to via that magazine. Can you share a bit on that?
Most certainly. It's the Teen Vogue, T-E-E-N, Teen Vogue magazine. Yeah. And this magazine has an article
it's promoted
that I would best
it's promoted as a magazine that deals with teen fashion and and stuff like that. Very harmless stuff generally. Yeah.
That is right. However, I believe that Teen Vogue have now taken things one step further from being an innocent magazine, an innocent medium for young children and teenagers to learn about makeup, to learn about dress sense and fashion. Because now Teen Vogue has become a platform, electronically and paper copy, where young people and teenagers are being, as I would describe it, enticed into lifestyles that many would not approve of. Now, for myself, I am a practicing Christian. I'm a born-again Christian. And so that is one of the big motivations behind what I do. For the last 8 years, I have been traveling around the world working unpaid, including as a lawyer. I'm very passionate about my work, but realistically, my faith is what drives me forward. Because after all, who would work 8 years without a paid job? As a result of my lifestyle of volunteering, educating and empowering people, and as a result of my strong relationship with Jesus Christ, I started to do a weekly podcast during the lockdown. Now, this podcast is for the purposes of educating and empowering people on topics including abuse, human trafficking, incest, child marriage, and the likes. As I've expressed before, education is key. And the reality is that a lot of people have their head in the sand. They don't want to know what is going on around them, which I think is not useful. Because at the end of the day, when you can understand what is going on around you, it means you can make better choices and better decisions. And so therefore, in these podcasts, I bring to light certain topics such as this article. Now, I will be honest with you, doing this podcast was very difficult because of the nature of the topic. And in addition, the nature of my audience. My audience come from all around the world, people who I know personally and friends of friends of friends. However, as a Christian, it was very difficult for me to bring this to the forefront, particularly through a verbal recording. The article is in reference to engaging in anal sex. Now, having done a lot of research in websites such as Vinci Confessions and the College Confessions, and having spoken to young people, particularly in the Caribbean, who open up to me about their sexual exploits, the reality is that children are not as innocent as we may think they are. In fact, parents and caregivers really need to be in their children's business, because there are young people all around the world, not just here in the Caribbean, who are engaging in sexual activity, who are watching movies on Netflix like Cuties, and they are emulating what they see. This article advises girls and boys about the best ways in which they can engage in anal sex. Now, there are some individuals who I know personally in the St. Vincent and overseas who have engaged in fornication, which is, in other words, it's when you engage in sexual activity outside of marriage with multiple partners. Some of these individuals have had abortions or have even suffered STDs that are permanent. One thing I can say, and I say this with caution, is that the article is written in a very articulate fashion, if I can go so far. And one thing I can say, too, is the way in which it's written, I think they're trying to avoid anybody sort of speaking out against it, because they are very clear throughout that you can engage, you do not have to engage. You can continue to read the article, you do not have to read the article. So the way they write it is though they're not on either side. You can engage or cannot. And I also observe that throughout this article, it makes a very valid point about communication and about speaking to your partner before engaging in this activity. The reality is a lot of relationships break down because of a lack of communication. Whether it's heterosexual or homosexual, communication is key. And one thing, if I can use the word commend, as a Christian, if I can use this term, one thing I can commend about the article is that they talk about communication. They are not advocating for you to engage in this, but they say if you choose to do so, communicate to your partner, have a conversation. Realistically speaking, if people engaging in sexual activity communicated clearly to one another, I believe a lot of the issues that are had in that relationship or in that intimacy would be completely different. I don't want to go down the route when it comes to consent and engaging in sexual activity that is without consent, because that is a whole different thing. But what I will say is that this article repeats over and over again, communication, communication. However, one of the issues is that it talks about engaging in this type of sexual activity. It places you at risk of STDs and HIV. And so I am confused as to why they would encourage such a practice or a lifestyle where there is a very high possibility of you contracting HIV. That concerns me. And I even know of young people who engage in sexual activity, and when I say young, I mean all ages, sexual activity with inanimate objects, flute, baseball bat, carrot. Now, if the person is in a religious background or comes from a devout faith where sex after marriage is what is advised and recommended, that young person may believe in their mind, if I engage sexually with these inanimate objects, it keeps me pure and it keeps me a virgin. That is really not the reality. The same as exposure to pornography that may keep you a virgin, so to speak, but not in your mind, and your mind is very powerful. And as I looked through this article, and I came to the conclusion, there are other articles, both for males and for females, that discuss ways in which a male or female can engage in masturbation to get the best out of that sexual experience. And these are young children that should be focusing on their education and their future, not on such sexual exploits and sexual activities.
We see
Quite
that.
quite a mouthful, yeah.
Brother Delbert?
I think that's quite a mouthful to deal with. She suggested that she did not like the word awareness and that she prefers the term that we should educate ourselves about the plight of these young women and increasingly young men. But how do you educate yourself if you do not first become aware of the problem?
I'm trying to think of the best way to answer that question. Because I would say whether or not you have awareness, it doesn't mean to say that you know everything. Because, for example, in parts of Africa, we have something called breast ironing. Now, for those people who have not, let's say, joined my groups or have not been to programs, conferences, events in relation to what goes on in Africa, you would not even have the awareness of breast ironing. What about dowry murders, honor killings? Again, you may lack the awareness because you don't come from a community that deals with this topic. So awareness often, I guess, is the starting point. But if we go just on awareness, there's a lot of stuff we have no knowledge about. And so what you're saying, I understand the theory behind it, but the challenge I have is that often it starts with awareness and it ends with awareness. So I rather just remove that word altogether and educate people, because awareness is often surface-based. You may know what is going on around you, but you don't understand it's human trafficking. So you may know about girls from Union Island going to my road in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and call that promiscuity because of your awareness. You are clueless to the fact it's human trafficking. And that's one of the challenges I have in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. People are aware, and the challenge that I'm facing is that their awareness becomes fact and becomes reality. When I try to scratch on the surface and get them to understand it is more than just that, they are so shocked and taken aback. They really do not believe it. They think that maybe I've got my wires crossed. And so that is the problem. Awareness is becoming their truth and their reality, and that is not the facts. It's based on movies like Taken. It's based on stories of kidnappings. It's based on issues in Trinidad where girls are going missing. When in fact, it is not always like that. And that is why I think the awareness will not work, because people believe that what they know is the reality. And as a result of that, that awareness is the reason why when I do programs in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we have 5 people, 10 people turn up because they don't think it's happening here. But if we can act as though the knowledge you have is insufficient, you're just scratching the surface, you haven't gone deeper, you need to be educated, then I believe the room will be filled, because people are like, wait a minute, I actually know nothing about this, rather than she's just promiscuous, she's just flirtatious, she's just a prostitute, and making excuses for something on the basis of your lack of knowledge.
So, as you mentioned, the whole issue of awareness and things happening and people are drawing certain conclusions, but not really facing the actual reality of, you know, what the whole situation embodies. In one of those clips that you shared with me, you mentioned something to do with an experience with a child, with the whole question of can you keep a secret, and the outcome of the conversation that you had, and the subsequent conversation that took place between the child and the teacher. Do you want to share on that a little bit?
Certainly. So I think that's probably in reference to one of the students that I give reference to quite frequently. If I recall, there was a 7-year-old who came to school and disclosed what she was going through. Now, the whole tagline, "Can you keep a secret?" it actually comes from my own personal experience. I was a victim of sexual abuse by my mother's first husband from the ages of 4 to 10. It started with tickling, and then it progressed on to attempted rape during my sleep. And as a result of what I went through, I suffered with the trauma of having severe insomnia. So even in my adult years, I still have severe issues with sleep, and I have a big problem with that. What I try to do is get people to understand that when a child communicates to you, they may not use language you're used to or language you understand. And so therefore, I bring my own story to the forefront to get people to realize that when a child is disclosing to you, for example, they may ask you in such a way that you do not know what it is they want to communicate. So with myself, for example, I asked my grandfather and my aunt, can you keep the secret? And they responded with the words, it depends. Now, as a result of their response, I did not disclose to them what I was going through for 6 years of my life. In a place like Ghana, the children may not say, can you keep a secret? They might say, can I tell you a secret? They might say, I want to say something to you. You're not going to beat me, are you? In other words, the point I'm trying to make is, children will use different ways to communicate, but it's for you to understand what they're trying to get across. Many adults, parents and caregivers, and those over the age of 18, often fight me on this point. Having been a victim and survivor of sexual abuse for 6 years of my life, and still suffering with the trauma where insomnia is concerned, I categorically stand on this point. Whenever a child comes up to you and says the words, can you keep a secret? You respond with the words yes or something affirmative. Once the child has communicated that, whatever is going on, daddy is abusing me, uncle's abusing me, grandma is abusing me, because women do it too, when the child has disclosed that, you respond to them. For example, I have to break your trust, and then you phone the authorities. So I'll explain it again. Can you keep a secret? Yes. The child discloses whatever they have gone through, and then you tell them, I have to break your trust and phone the police. Do not phone the accused. So my stepfather was Tony. Do not call him and say, Tony, I heard you've been sexually abusing your stepdaughter Juanita, because he will deny it. We need to allow the police to investigate, because far too often abuse comes out and the family will have a discussion with the abuser, who will obviously deny it. The stories that I often make reference to are girls, I believe all in the United States, 3 different girls to my knowledge. Each of them came to school and said different variations of the following statement. One of the children said, Daddy is licking my cookie. The teacher said, tell your daddy to buy his own cookie. Another child said, Daddy is eating my cookie. And the third child said, Daddy is licking my cookie. And the teacher said, tell your daddy to lick his own cookie. Now the cookie is in reference to the private parts. So if you had communicated to that child, it depends, he or she will most likely not disclose what is going on. If you respond yes or something affirmative, the child will tell you, Daddy is licking my cookie. However, because you do not know cookie is the private parts, you will not do anything about it. And that is why children need to be educated with the correct terminology, private parts. Because these stories of these 7-year-olds, to my knowledge, of 3 different children, all of them came to school and said, Daddy is licking my cookie, Uncle is licking my cookie, and nobody had any idea what it meant. So we need to have the right kinds of conversations with children in our care, and we need to respond to any type of question about secrets affirmatively so that the child can open up to you. And once the child has opened up, your responsibility is to let the authorities do their job. 99% of the time, and this is not a statistic, I'm just saying here, 99% of the time, what I would say is that when a children discloses, they are disclosing what is a reality. We know that some children lie, but I would say 99% of the time, the child is telling you what is going on. And if for some reason the child is lying, allow the police to investigate and to uncover that the child is lying, because if they're lying, there is a reason for that, and we need to get to the root cause.
When I was introducing you, I mentioned the fact that you've written a book. And we see that the title of the book is just the same statement that we've been using here. Can you keep a secret? And you published that book.
Yes.
Published in Trinidad in February of last year. Can you give us a little more background on it? And how was it that it was in Trinidad? Why wasn't it somewhere else?
This is my book here. Can You Keep a Secret? This is my book. And actually, the book was written in Trinidad, and it came out of one of my TV interviews on Trinity Catholic TV station. And when I did the interview, one of the panelists asked me, Juanita, can you explain, can you tell a secret? And I said, it's called Can You Keep a Secret? And I explained it on that interview. And from that day forward, every interview that I did, I made it a point to explain, can you keep a secret? The very same night that I came home from this interview, I decided I want to write a book. And that is where the idea came out of. It came out of an interview that I did on air, and I decided I need to take this one step further. It's great that I'm talking about it, but I want to put it in print. And in fact, my book was written in Trinidad. I wrote it in about a month. It's almost 400 pages. So I don't know how I managed to do that. I thoroughly enjoyed the writing process. I had lots of support from people who were able to encourage me, share stories to keep me motivated in what I did. And in fact, I actually published the book through self-publishing in Ghana, printed it in Ghana and in India, but I launched the book in Ghana of the previous year, and then I also launched it in Trinidad with the Shogunist Mayor. We had a program together. For me, my desire is to do more than just speak. I want to leave a mark. At the end of the day, we know one thing is certain, we will all die. And I don't want people to remember me or my name. I want them to remember the concepts, the things that I talk about, so that children do not have to be subjected to rape, to sodomy, or any such thing by caregivers, family members, friends, or classmates. And in fact, what I do with the book, I speak about my own story, I share other stories, and the same way that I communicate in interviews, in presentations, is exactly how very, very much as though I am conversating with the reader. And what I'm also doing with this book, I am donating 60% of profits to charity. In fact, my desire is to build safe houses in the Philippines for victims of cyber sex trafficking. Why the Philippines? Because it is #1 for cyber sex trafficking. This is where girls and boys are being sexually abused via the internet by mother, father, brother, cousin, etc. And what people do not know, in the Philippines, it has the youngest age of sexual consent in the world, which is 12. And that is the reason why I want to build safe houses there, because incest and abuse is a major issue. So my book, although I am a pro bono lawyer, I quit my job on August 14 in England. Although I'm a pro bono lawyer, my desire is to use the skills and talents I have to be a blessing to others. The book is 70 EC or $25 US, and 60% of that will be used for building safe houses. And another venture that I'm working towards is building bakeries around the world with open hiring policy. Open hiring policy is simply hiring former prostitutes, former homeless people, and ex-convicts. I believe in John 3:16. I believe in a God of second chances. I want to build safe houses for victims of abuse, cyber sex, and trafficking. And I want to employ criminals, ex-convicts, murderers, rapists, and pedophiles. Because the way that I see it, if I can give a pedophile an honest living, he will stop selling his daughter for sex. If I can give an honest living to an ex-convict, he's going to stop burglarizing homes and robbing people. I'm not condoning their behavior, but I believe that the best thing I can do is empower these people, because the way that I see it, they are human beings who got caught. The reality is when you go into prison, the only reason a prison has inmates is because those people got caught. But the frightening reality is there are a lot more criminals that are outside and not in prison bars because nobody has spoken up about the infractions that they have done, the abuse they have been subjected to, and that is the major issue.
Speaking of prisons, have you been visiting many prisons, and what have been your findings?
So far, I've had the opportunity to visit YTC, which is a youth training camp in Trinidad. I have not yet had the opportunity to visit their prison, which has been very disappointing for me. However, I hope that opportunity will become available in the future. Normally, around this time of year, I'm in Trinidad and Tobago, but because of the current circumstances, it seems illogical to go there when I am limited on the number of people I can speak to. However, I will say that since coming to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I have been to the Belle and the Kingstown prisons on 4 occasions, sharing my message to the prison inmates. What I will say to you, despite being surrounded in a room of male criminals, on every one of those occasions, the prison inmates showed me the most respect, and I was so amazed by that. I will say that I spent a time presenting to a group of males who are professionals. I will not say their profession. However, during that presentation, there were a lot of inappropriate jokes. There was a lot of testosterone, and at times it was quite frustrating because I had to keep stopping and starting my presentation. However, when I was in the prisons on 2 occasions in Belle and 2 occasions in Kingstown, the inmates showed me so much respect that I was amazed. And truth be told, if anybody in the room made an inappropriate joke or comment, that came from me. What I will tell you is when I look around that room, all I see is human beings with a tendency to rape, human beings with a tendency to murder, human beings with a tendency to have sex with children. All I see behind the prison walls are human beings. And in fact, I've been to prison about a dozen times. I visit prison all the time. Any opportunity for me to go to prison, I'm there. I know some of the inmates on first and second name basis. The prison in Kingstown makes the best bread I've had in my life. So I love prison bread, but I spent a lot of time just passing by. And if I'm honest with you, on Christmas Day, I got left at prison. I got forgotten. So I was in prison for 2 hours on Christmas Day. I got left behind, which was not a very pleasant experience. But the point I'm making is I feel very comfortable there. And even one of the staff said the first time you came here, I was surprised at how comfortable and relaxed you were. The fact that it was only yourself and your male friend, myself and another staff and all these inmates, you were very relaxed and comfortable. And I told him, all I see is people. I know that the God that I serve will protect me. I do not know the infractions they have committed, but I see them as people. And truth be told, I am convinced if many of them were not behind prison walls and had never committed whatever crime they had, we could have been friends on the outside because all I see is people. And for me, I just have a heart for helping the marginalized. Truth be told, I am convinced if I had not been a victim of sexual abuse, I would want nothing to do with pedophiles. I'm just thinking realistically, why do I have such a heart for these people? Your average Christian, your average human being believes they should be incarcerated, burned, or the worst. Death penalty, torture, and these things. I don't believe that at all, because I understand people commit crimes for various reasons. I'm not justifying, but I know there are reasons behind every person's behavior, every person's reaction to something, and every person's criminal response to a circumstance or situation. I'm not justifying, but like I said, if I had not been a victim of abuse, I don't think I would feel this way about perpetrators. But in saying that, if my stepfather was still alive, would I want to work with him? I do not think so. He is a pedophile who, one could say, technically destroyed my life, or at least has destroyed my sleep, for want of a better word. I would not want to work with him. Obviously not. Obviously not. But I have a different heart towards those who are in prison for the crimes they have committed towards others, or even amongst people close to home, like family members and friends.
From what, Brother Delbert? Yeah?
Yes, I am particularly interested in how you handle that intersection between being an advocate against human trafficking and prostitution and other qualifications in the sex industry and being a fundamentalist Christian. How do you handle that? What informs your judgment? Because I ask the question because there's a tendency, if somebody's in trouble, okay, and sometimes they don't know that they need help, but let's assume that this person knows that he or she needs help. They want somebody to help them on the issue that's plaguing them right now. But there's a tendency with people of strong faith who tend to wear that faith on their sleeve, and instead of trying to work the problem from a professional and clinical point of view, they tend to protesticize.
For me personally, I don't believe it's my duty to convert people to Christianity. I believe that is Jesus' job. For me, whenever I speak to people, I let them know what I believe and what I stand for. I am just a born-again Christian. My denomination is irrelevant. However, I will say with my denomination, we do not go around knocking on doors. We do not go around trying to, as one would say, force our faith onto others. That is not the denomination I'm a part of. Instead, I would say that we are Christians who move around amongst non-believers, and we are often accepted into the fold. Why? Because we do not judge and condemn. Because we do not constantly throw it into people's face about our beliefs. We respect them and where they're at. For me, if you consider the nature of the work that I do and the nature of the people that I associate with, you would have to ask yourself, how many Christians do you find in the red light district? How many Christians do you find hanging out in prison on Christmas Day? How many Christians do you find who will associate with gays and lesbians and ladyboys? I do, as best as I can, see people through the eyes of Jesus. I do not agree with being a ladyboy. I do not believe that is a correct practice. However, I believe we have free will and we are responsible for the choices that we make. I will love people for who they are, but I will not endorse their behaviors because of what I believe. But in saying that, when I have gone to the red light district and I see ladyboys, I will talk to them. I will hug them. I will engage them in conversation. I will eat a meal with them. I will do all of this because Jesus did the same. However, I will not be giving them women's underwear. I am not going to endorse their lifestyle. And so for me, I would say I do not hide my faith. I let people know who I am, what I believe, and what I stand for. Because I believe, as it says in the Bible, that you have overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of your testimony. Words are powerful. Even atheists know that. We have books in the secular world that talks about the power of our words. I have a podcast. I speak freely about my faith so people know what is driving me. There are many amazing men and women of no faith whatsoever, and they do great work. But I want people to know that I do what I do because of my faith. I do not want to be elevated in any shape or form. I want to retain a humble platform, and I want my message to go far and wide. It is not about me. It is not about my name. It is not about changing cases. At the end of the day, the Bible talks about light and darkness, and there are many people who are lost and are seeking after something. If I can be an inspiration to them, that is a beautiful thing, but I cannot solve all their problems. If somebody would like me to pray with them or for them, I can do that. But I do not force my faith on people, because that is not what my denomination is about. As I said, I will not specify my denomination, but that is not what we do. We believe that the best Bible for the non-Christian to read is our lifestyle. So I believe when I go into the prison, when I talk to the ladyboys, to the gays and the lesbians, to the ex-convicts and the criminals, I believe that is a bigger testimony than trying to force Jesus onto people. People should hopefully see what I do and be inspired by that. I do not believe in good works, but I believe that your life should actually speak volumes about who you are as a person. And if I'm honest with you, there are many Christians who would not endorse what I do, who would speak ill of what I do because they are judgmental. For me, I see every person as a human being. If an individual is a pedophile, I do not agree with their lifestyle, but I see them as a person. I believe that I need to love them for who they are, not for what they do, but at the same time, if a person wants support, who wants a way of escape, and I'm able to direct them in that way, I will definitely do so. And I believe that is one of the reasons why I have been able to do this successfully for the last 6 years. I have been on Hindu, Christian TV station, Catholic, Muslim TV station. One of my closest friends is a Muslim. The fact is I have been invited back and back and back on these platforms because whatever I am doing, it is clearly not offensive to them, and it is clearly done in such a way that they can endorse my message and even agree with many of my points.
I wanted to ask when you spoke about the book, where is your book available?
Well, at the moment, the book is available right here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines at Games Book Center. Due to some technical difficulties, it is not on Amazon. And when I say technical difficulties, I'm referring to the last 12 months. And so at this current time, it is not yet available on Amazon. But I trust that this is a new year. I'm believing in new seasons, and I hope that will no longer be the case, that the book can become more available. There are also some copies that are available in Trinidad. However, the book really needs to get out far and wide. But like you said earlier on when I entered onto the program, Murphy's Law. Murphy's Law, whatever can go wrong, will go wrong. I am convinced that my book will change lives. The money is going to make a big impact in the lives of victims and survivors of abuse. There is a lot in that book that will transform the way people think about themselves, about relationships. That book is going to inspire people, empower, educate. And as a result of the goodness of that book, I'm noticing that I keep coming up against obstacle after obstacle. And there are many great people in the world who likewise are doing good things, but the attacks come, the distractions come, and that is unfortunate. But despite that, I stay positive that, Lord willing, 2021, the book will be on Amazon. The story is too long to share, but literally everything that could go wrong with the book has gone wrong with the book. And I will be writing a second book. It's called Behind the Scenes of Can You Keep a Secret? When I was going through all these challenges, it was very stressful. Now I could probably laugh about it, but the book still isn't really out. It doesn't really exist. But I believe that in time it will be out and it will become available for all around the world to read, to be educated, empowered, and inspired.
Since early in the conversation, one of our viewers have asked, have you traveled to southern Italy? And if you can tell anything about the African sex trade there.
I've not yet had the opportunity to travel to southern Italy, although I have spent time there. When I was 17, I moved to Switzerland, actually, and trained as a chef in an international school, and I worked in the United Nations in Geneva. On one of our school trips, we spent a day in Torino around the time of the Olympics. However, since that time, I have not yet had an opportunity to return to Italy. But I do know that there is an issue, particularly of Nigerian women being trafficked in France and also likewise in Italy, I believe. These Nigerian women, they are often under a juju curse. And as a result of that, they will not speak out against their trafficker. I know of a case of a woman who was pregnant. She refused to speak out against her trafficker until her child was born, because she had been placed under a curse, and she believed if she spoke out prematurely, her child would be born stillborn. The problem is, the Western world do not understand about juju, black magic, or curses. There are women who will go to court, and when they go to court, they are so frightened about these curses that they will have panic attacks and palpitations. So as a result of that, it is very difficult to work with these victims because they will not speak out because they have been placed under this curse. That is what they believe, and we need to respect their beliefs so we can provide the support for them. And beyond that, be patient with these victims. Be patient with these victims. It may seem ridiculous to us, but we are not from Nigeria. We do not understand how it works. And so for us to support victims like this pregnant lady, we need to apply patience. Because as I just said, she did eventually disclose, but after her child was born.
A visit to your site produces a certificate, the International Center for Parliamentary Studies, Professional Certificate in Trafficking in Tackling Human Trafficking. Can you tell us about that certification, what it entails, and and how does one become a student of that training?
Well, what I would say, I attended the training back in April of last year, and unfortunately, I don't want to go into specifics, but I was very disappointed with this particular schooling, and I would not advocate for anyone to follow through with attending their courses. I say that carefully speaking here. Why? Because I felt that what I had been promised, which was a level 5 CMI certificate, is not what I received. And that was my purpose of investing almost 3,000 British pounds, because I wanted to be able to show that I had been trained up to the standard. Instead, I received a certificate that is a certificate of attendance. For somebody who has been doing human trafficking work for almost a decade, I did not need a certificate of attendance costing me thousands of pounds. By the grace of God, I did get a scholarship, and so I didn't spend as much as I anticipated or as much as I intended to, but that is really besides the point. And I say this with great humility. When I attended this 1-week course, well, 4 days to be exact, it was advertised as 5, but it was indeed 4. And it wasn't even full days, which I'm not satisfied about, and my credit card company is fighting that I can get a refund. What I will certainly say, though, is that a lot of the information that was shared in this course, I know it already. There was myself and 2 women from outside of England who attended this course. They were new to the topic. However, the vast majority of what was taught on these 4 days, if I can even call that, were things I already knew. So it didn't teach me anything new. There was stuff that it inspired me about, stuff that it encouraged me about. But to spend all that money for something I already know about, in my opinion, was a waste. And like I said, I say it in humility, but I have traveled the world. I read on this stuff. I study. I go to the red light. I talk to victims and survivors. So there's a lot of stuff that I know. I cannot know everything, of course not. I have not been to southern Italy. I have not been to Nigeria. There's still a lot to learn, but this course really just reinforced what I already knew, which for me was really a waste of my time and a waste of my money. And like I said, I did not get the certification level 5 CMI, which was really the desire and purpose of attending this course. Unfortunately, in life, when we do great work, people will come and speak against us. Slander, defamation of character, that will happen to the best of us. And because there are people who seem to not understand my credentials or my knowledge or don't think I know anything, I said, let me pay up to $3 grand so I can be certified and I can deal with these rumors and the slander and bacchanal that is being spread like wildfire. At the end of the day, the experience only goes so far. We sometimes need to go back to the drawing board, go back to the books, which is what I did. But as I said, unfortunately, it did not tell me much more than what I already knew, and I felt like I'd been cheated, if I'm honest with you.
Okay. No. What can you tell us about the United Kingdom's Global Goodwill Ambassadors Program?
Well, actually, the Global Goodwill Ambassadors, that is in reference to an organization in the United States, I believe, and this is where people from around the world have been doing pro bono volunteer work. Volunteer does not necessarily mean unpaid, but they've been doing work internationally in their country or elsewhere, which is humanitarian. There are very different departments and divisions, and so there are people who work on topics to do with water, topics to do with slavery, to do with abuse, poverty, people who have a passion. And so I was able to be certified by the Global Goodwill Ambassador for having volunteered for more than a decade, 8 years full-time. So I had a few jobs last year, but those jobs are very short-lived, unfortunately. I say unfortunately because for me, I have a ministry of traveling the world and educating people on this topic. And when my boss refused to allow me to go to Trinidad to do the very same work I've been doing for 4 to 5 years, I quit my job. It is not my desire to keep quitting jobs. When you believe you have a calling on your life, you do what you need to do. And so for 8 years, I have been working completely pro bono around the world. I reached out to them and I explained to them what I had been doing. And so they gave me this way to be recognized for making a difference and a contribution to those around. For example, in the Philippines and in Asia, I spent a lot of time volunteering in orphanages, teaching English and playing games with children. I have a real heart and passion for serving others. I have been in St. Vincent from August 20. I have been working unpaid. That means I am a volunteer. I am not paid for speaking. Everything I do is completely pro bono because my desire is to make a difference to lives of others without putting a price tag attached. I dream of having a paid job, but the challenge that I have is the jobs I've had thus far, working with prostitutes and in human trafficking, have hindered my ministry. And I believe sitting in an office limits me from what I do. And so for that reason, I quit my last job, August 14, back to working and serving unpaid.
So you have been in the Caribbean, St. Vincent in particular, for almost 6 months. Have you sought to engage? Have you sought to engage the government of St. Vincent in terms of? I was tempted to use the word awareness, but I remember your very little affinity to it. So have you sought to engage in terms of whether or not there is a campaign there to better educate people? Because the reality is that sex trafficking and as it's defined in all terms does happen in the Caribbean. It's something that we're probably not terribly familiar with, and that we may see certain things happening and we may not immediately qualify it as sex trafficking, but in actual fact it is. So my question is, have you sought to engage the government of St. Vincent where you are now, or any other Caribbean government as a matter of fact, in terms of trying to better educate them? Because it is a problem, and it's going to get worse. The issues, the terrible stories coming out of Trinidad and Venezuela and Guyana and some other, you go further south into the Americas. How do we get the government to engage, and especially in small countries like that where you have finite resources and stuff like that may not, rise to the top in terms of the things that government determines to be most important to the citizens. How do you get them to engage?
Well, that's the thing. What I can say thus far, in Trinidad and Tobago, I've had opportunities to speak far and wide, and I would say in the Caribbean, that is where I've had the greatest success. Truth be told, I do miss it there, because when I'm there, although they may be few in number, I would say that those who attend embrace the message more, and I've often had a domino effect. When I speak at a school, church, or community center, somebody invites me somewhere else, etc., etc. Whenever I've been there, it has always been very impactful. The message is being spread far and wide. Unfortunately, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I have not had such same reception, in the sense of I may speak, people become passionate, and they have all these ideas, and then nothing happens. And for me, that is disheartening, because it seems like a lot of empty words. When I share my presentation, I give a lot of information, and it is often very overwhelming because I have given so much. And so far, those who have come have really spoken so highly of my message, which is amazing. But they always say, I wish someone else was here, I wish. Not enough people are coming. The difficulty that I have currently is the lockdown. Now, of course, it is important for the government to engage in this. I completely agree. But right now, there are so many other things that are taking their attention. I'm not making excuses. I'm just looking at the reality. But then in saying that, I have been here from August 20, and I've made my presence be known. I will never speak ill of any person whatsoever, or any country or system. But what I would say is that I am available. No matter what people may think about the topic, no matter what their views may be on the work that I do or the way in which I do that, that will not deter me. Whether I have support of a government or do not have support, I will continue to bring my message. However, if I can have support behind me, my message can go further and wide. But then in saying that, I have not yet had the opportunity to meet the Prime Minister of Trinidad, nor the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. However, when that does happen, and I'm speaking here positively, when that does happen, I believe it will enable me to be able to have a greater reach. Because if I reach out to a church and say I would like to come, they may say yes, but then they and ah and make excuses. But if I can be endorsed by people in government, then they'll be more willing to open their doors, because unfortunately, a lot of people have no idea about the message I will bring. They may be afraid that I will speak ill of their denomination, which is never my intention or my desire. Or it may simply be that they do not know who I am or what I'm going to bring, and they have a fear that I may bring a message that is sexually perverse or inappropriate, or that I may bring a message that will make them uncomfortable, or even worse, that will bore the congregation to tears. Because I have had people tell me in honesty that I thought the presentation was going to be boring, and it was not. And I hear that all the time, and that probably explains why so few people come, because they expect it to be boring. I shouldn't have to sell what I do. All I need is for people to attend, to hear, and like in Trinidad, to spread the message. I've spoken on TV stations here, radio stations. I have been featured in the newspapers. But as of now, there's still a lot that needs to be done. The community college is a place I have not yet had an opportunity to speak at. And there is a lot of lewdness and sexual activity that goes on in the community college. I have had students in St. Vincent and students in Trinidad actually invite me to their schools. That for me is amazing, because whatever it is I'm sharing, the students are so inspired, interested, and even entertained by what I share that they actually invite me to their schools, and that is an amazing thing. So if I have students who are engaging, why is it that others are not? I don't have an answer to that. All I can say is, with or without any person's help, regardless of their position, I will continue to do my work. I will not allow it to dissuade me or deter me. However, it would be easier if I had support and endorsement. My message never changes. I am consistent. I'm here to talk about human trafficking and child abuse prevention. As I've said, I'm a born-again Christian, and I share my faith, because if it wasn't for my faith, I would not be here. And I say that literally speaking. My flight got cancelled on the 10th of September. That was a prayer request that I had. In fact, I have friends who likewise were praying that I could stay in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Whether we believe in prayer or not, it was my desire to not leave, and I'm still here. I do not work, but by the grace of God, I have had friends and even strangers open their homes, their hearts, and their wallets to enable me to stay here without having to work illegally. At the end of the day, when all the resources run out, what can you do? I'm here because I believe God has allowed me to be. And even recently in Beckwith, I gave a presentation, very few in number, but I was grateful to have had the opportunity. Despite the lockdown, I was able to share my message with people who I'm convinced will pass on the information.
So that was actually my next question, because I know there is a women's center, I think at Mona campus in Jamaica, your homeland of your parents, as you indicated earlier in the show. And I wanted to know whether or not, it is something that you're looking, that it's part of your plans to engage at that level, because our tertiary education institutions in the Caribbean plays an important role in the social development of the country. Also, I am aware that through USAID, there are a number of grants that are given in the Caribbean to respective governments to help fight those issues of child abuse, of child sexual abuse, of prostitution in very young people. So I know, for example, in Grenada, that problem is being handled by the Ministry of Social Development. It might be a different agency in other countries. My question is that if you think what you're doing, and I agree with you that it is so critically important in terms of saving lives and putting young people in a positive and upward moving trajectory, why have you not sought to engage with both the academic institutions and the governments?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
My question is, why have you not made a greater effort to sort of engage with the academic institutions in the Caribbean and the respective governments in terms of getting your message across?
I I just want to ask, it's interesting that you have phrased your question like that, because I believe that is an assumption on your part. As I've explained, with or without support, I will continue to do my work. And I have to repeat here, because unfortunately, when I go on air in St. Vincent, this is not in relation to you, but often the people who call up try to draw me into certain discussions I will not engage with. What you have to understand is that I'm doing this work with or without support. I am available. I am very vocal. You have to appreciate that I don't always have the right connections because I'm a foreigner entering into a new place. I reach out to people. I will not necessarily name drop, but I reach out to those who are in positions to enable me to continue my work. If I reach out to person X or Y and they do not respond to my repeated phone calls or text messages or visiting their office, what more can I do? I am a persistent person. I'm going to use reference to the Bible here. I have a Jewish friend, non-practicing. He is an amazing lawyer called Kenneth Landau, New York lawyer. And he told me, Juanita, you should ask. Whether or not there is a scholarship available, ask. I always ask. There's a story in the Bible about a lady who kept persistently asking the king until he got fed up and gave her what she wanted. People who know me know that I will not stop asking until you block me. I am persistent. I am persistent. And if I am persistent with certain people, I will not mention names, and they do not take the bait, they do not engage, what more am I supposed to do? I do not have issues with working with anybody, even if, God forbid, there is a person here in St. Vincent who has slandered my name. I do not have an issue with working with them. I will not make reference to a country, but there is a place I've gone to, and in that place, I appear on one of their platforms. The person who invites me on ignores me for months and months and months, and then people will reach out to that individual and say, why have you not had Miss Headley on your platform? And then the very next day I get an invitation. I know that this person is only doing that to make their viewers happy. They are not doing it to benefit or bless me, because whenever I reach out to them and I ask, can I appear on your platform, I get a wall of silence. I will say it again, I am persistent. And there are people, I will not say their names, they know who they are, where I have gone to their office, I have texted them repeatedly, I have called, what more can I do? And it frustrates me, because I'm here doing this by myself. I am doing this to improve the nation, to improve the country. I am available. I have written newspaper articles. My number is out there. What more am I supposed to do? If somebody is ignoring me, I cannot twist their arm. And that is not my place. All I will do is continue to do my work, as I said earlier, with or without their help. Because for whatever reason, there are people in different countries who will not engage me. I cannot tell you why. I'm not psychic. Maybe it's because they want to sweep it under the carpet to improve tourism. I don't know the reasons, but I make myself available. So your assumption is incorrect. I reach out to people. As I mentioned earlier with my book, I reached out to the mayor of Chaguanas and we collaborated together. That is because I had a connection who knew her. She is the mayor of Chaguanas in Trinidad. Right here, I don't have the connections, and the few that I have, I'm getting a wall of silence. So if you have some advice, please do give it to me, but I try, and I can tell you there are people who would speak and say, Juanita messages us to we're sick of her messages. She will not stop. Every week she has a Zoom. Every week she has a podcast. When will she stop messaging? I will not stop messaging until the world is free of slavery and exploitation.
Wow.
Speaking of institutions, there's a question as to whether you have any intention to set up an institution that educates young people on that issue.
For me, I believe that would be an amazing thing to do, but I have to be realistic here. I am a U.S. lawyer close to 7 years now. I am a chef, United Nations trained, a public speaker, and author. I feel I am overqualified and very unemployed. I believe it's important to focus on one thing at a time. My desire is to make a difference one person at a time. My focus right now is building safe houses in the Philippines and, in addition to that, building bakeries to hire ex-convicts. I do not want to have too many hats or too many baskets of ideas, because then they will fail. One thing at a time. I'm here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and I would like to work with the ex-convicts. That makes sense. I'm not in the Philippines. I'm not in Asia. And we have to go one step further. Although I am a U.S. attorney for close to 7 years, I did not have an income. I did not have the funding or finances. It is my desire to remain in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I do not even have the $1,000 required to get a work permit or to have status. So as a result of that, I'm at the crossroads. What happens when the stamp in my passport comes around? Having ideas are fantastic, but you often need tools, finances, or a team for them to come to fruition. I would rather focus on what I am good at. I'm a public speaker, a chef, and a lawyer. I'd rather keep my eyes fixed on the things that I'm passionate about, have the skills, and can do with minimal resources, minimal team, and minimal finances. Because after all, I'm traveling the world by myself, doing this work by myself. What more can I do?
So speaking of traveling the world, where to next from St. Vincent and the Grenadines?
If things were different, I would tell you, I would be going to Trinidad and Tobago. For the last 6 years, I have traveled there around January and February time to give my message prior to Carnival. There is no Carnival happening this year. However, that has been a consistent pattern for me. Even last year, my boss declined my holiday request for me to go to Trinidad. I quit my job 2 weeks later to go to Trinidad. I'm here in the Caribbean. If things change, I'll be heading back there. If not, realistically speaking, the next place on the list would be the UK. That is where I'm from. And of course, I came here for 3 weeks, not for 6 months. So I'm running out of change of clothing. So for me, if it's not Trinidad, it would eventually be the UK. But for right now, with everything that is going on in my life, because in life we have ups and downs, with all of the dramas that are happening at this current moment in time, I don't have any intentions of leaving the Caribbean anytime soon by the grace of God.
So what about that next book that you've spoken about? How soon can, is it likely to be out there,
realistically speaking, the book should have been written 2 years ago. But truth be told, I don't believe the book will be ready until Can You Keep a Secret is available for purchase. Because as I've mentioned, the book talks about everything that can go wrong will go wrong. If the book is not yet on Amazon, Can You Keep a Secret, the behind-the-scenes book cannot be completed yet until we have come to the end of the story. But in saying that, so much has happened concerning the book. I like to procrastinate far too much, so I've done nothing. But really, the book should be ready. It should be ready right now as we speak. And once my book is on Amazon, then the behind-the-scenes will be ready to be released. However, in saying that, writing and bringing a book to fruition costs money. And as a result of that, even if the book was ready, I needed a typesetter, a cover design, just to make it a free ebook. All of this requires money, and as I said, as a pro bono lawyer, where am I going to get the money from? But I believe that all things will happen in the right time and in the due time, but the first focus is getting my book on Amazon, getting it available worldwide. That is a major priority at this time.
Well, you said, from our previous conversation, our closing time was designated to be 10 p.m. and we're coming up to 2 minutes before 10. So any closing words for us in the next 2 minutes?
Certainly. I want to make sure people can find me so that they can invite me to do my programs remotely or in person. They can find me on the internet. My website is Changing Cases, changingcases.org. My Facebook is Changing Cases, Changing CASES, and my number it is +1 784 454 1693. So I'll just repeat that again because I'm providing country code. +1 784 454 1693. But the best way to find me is simply by Googling me, Juanita Headley. You can find me on the internet. I'm about 3 pages thus far. And that way, if a person would like to know more about the work that I'm doing, if they would like to purchase a copy of the book, invite me to speak remotely or in person, or would like to join my team remotely and support the work I do, or to donate. As I've said, I want to make a difference in the lives of people. I'm here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. One of my major dreams is to open bakeries hiring ex-convicts. There are ex-convicts here and men who are still in prison that I would love to hire if I had the facility of a bakery in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So if somebody would like to give me land, sponsor me for that visa, $1,000 US, they can contact me. As I said earlier, the Bible tells us to ask and it shall be given, and there is nothing to lose by asking. I've been working unpaid for 8 years. I think I'm entitled to make a little ask, a little plug. Please do reach out. Again, Changing Cases, Changing CASES, changingcases.org, and my number +1 784 454 1693. That is my public number that can be shared freely.
Thank you very much, Ms. Headley. I mean, you've been anything but boring.